Welcome to the Question of Character podcast. My name is Bill Furlong and I'm co-host of the Question of Character podcast, and I want to thank you again for joining us today. Today's topic is one that I've wanted to record for years, like literally years. And the question is how can improv support the development of leader character? And I have a wonderful and perhaps the only guest in the world that I think can discuss this with us today. But first, I want to introduce you or reintroduce you again to my co-host and colleague, Dr. Mary Crossan. Mary is a distinguished university professor at Western. Her impressive bio can be found in links to this episode, the Question of Character website, or the Ivy Business School website. Mary, it's so nice to be with you and to see you again today.
Great to be here. So excited for this episode.
I'd like to welcome today's very special guest. She is a double-nominated Gemini actor who has appeared in numerous movies and TV series. She is a renowned teacher who has taught improv at Second City, Toronto for over 15 years, CAMH for 24 years, Toronto Metropolitan University's Adult Education for 15 years, and continues to teach at the Canadian Film Centre and Humber College, and has been a guest lecturer at the Shaw Festival and at the Toronto Metropolitan University's Theatre School. She has taught improv to MBA and EMBA students at Ivy Business School since 2017. In 2022, she was inducted into the Cornwall and Area Arts Hall of Fame. But perhaps her greatest legacy will be her academy, which she founded in 2010 and where she has had an enormous positive and life-changing impact on the lives of hundreds of her students from every conceivable walk of life and corner of the globe. She is Kate Ashby.
Woo!
Kate, that's a pretty impressive bio, and frankly, I don't think it actually does you justice. Anything that you wanted to add or even take away from that bio?
That I never learned to drive. I've done it all on foot.
Kate, delighted that you're here today to join Mary and I.
It's awesome to be here, Bill, with you and Mary.
So a little bit about the podcast before we get into it. I started taking improv from Kate at around the same time that I met Mary, so maybe about 10 years ago. And almost immediately I saw the connection between leader character and improv and the potential development of character. Mary already had an academic interest in improvisation, and she wrote a number of peer-reviewed academic articles, I think in the early 2000s. Mary also recognized that improv and leader character were going to be great partners, and I think one of the best things I ever did was to connect Mary and Kate, and that relationship has flourished to the benefit, I think, of all of their students. So maybe we'll start a little bit, Mary, talking to you about your historical interest in improvisation, this early academic interest that you had, and it was prior to the work you had done on leader character. What was it about improv, Mary, that had interested you from an academic perspective, and what did you discover from your research?
Right. And, it's interesting. I don't really often think of myself as an academic. It's funny when you say from an academic perspective, because what I was really interested in is organizational learning for strategic renewal. Like, how do organizations undergo major strategic change? How do they have agility? How do they deal with uncertainty and complexity? So prior to getting into the leader character space, I'd come across improvisation as a way of trying to understand agility. And I loved it because it was something that you not only could study and understand, but you could actually do and practice. And so it became pretty clear when we got into the leader character space that there was incredible connections between the organization level of strategic agility and the individual level of leader character. So that's kind of how these pieces came together.
So it seems to me that when you started working in leadership character, you were already connecting your earlier work on improvisation, and you immediately saw the connection. And I'm going to ask you this question in a moment, Kate, but I'll start with you, Mary. Do you think any or all of the dimensions are specifically affected when you think about that?
I cannot tell you. I wish I was like the, Spock and had this Vulcan mind melt, or what is it called? Is that what it's called? But it's that kind of ability to just say, what do we know about this? Because yes, all those dimensions of character are really implicated around being able to exercise through improv, but also enable you to practice improvisation. And I'll just give you an example for me of a really big one, confidence. Like a lot of people struggle with confidence, and that is a big factor or a part of courage when it relates to character. Well, several things we know about this. Well, what are you confident in? Well, people are confident in only spaces that they know, that they're competent about, areas that they can control, areas that they feel that they've got a game plan for. But what if you have confidence in your capacity to improvise? What if you have confidence in your ability to be in the unknown and the uncertain and know that you're going to be okay? And then if I connect it to things like humility and the vulnerability it takes to be a person who enters those spaces knowing that you don't have to put your guard up or set up some armor because you're worried about what others are going to think about you. And then it gets into areas like collaboration. I think, Kate, this is where we often think about it, right? Being open-minded and flexible and interconnected with another human being. People think that they're really good at that until they actually get into the practice of improvisation and they're going, oh, wow, I'm not that as open-minded as I thought I was. So those are some touch points for me, Bill, around the connections.
And Kate, this whole space was new to you, yet I've watched you operate and teach, and you've picked up the language of leader character, and you've connected it with the work that you do around improv. Any dimensions that you can specifically think of or adding to what maybe Mary has already said?
I think that one of my favorite parts of the class is at the very beginning, when I ask the class that I'm teaching, whatever group of people I'm teaching, I ask them what might stand in the way of you enjoying this workshop, because it's extremely important to get to that. And so many times, so that really speaks to the agility of themselves with other people, in front of other people, group agility, personal agility. And so many times it comes down to judgment. It comes down to lack of control. I won't be funny. I'll be on the spot. I won't know what to do. And really the big one is judgment. And I think that when the group suddenly gets into this mindset that we are all afraid of judgment and we're all afraid of failure and judgment in front of each other, there's something very powerful about starting the workshop like that. And just addressing that and talking about that is just a beautiful thing. And then we got to get up and start moving. So, but just that whole idea of confidence, which is something we're always working on, because confidence, Mary, comes up in that opening of the workshop so many times. And what I really feel is confidence isn't something that now I'm confident. Like, that is not the thing in life. In life, we have moments and times in our life when we're extremely confident, and then it can wane. Something can happen. Something can throw us. And I think that the practice of constantly coming back to confidence in the work environment and personally is extremely important. So addressing all of that stuff at the top of the workshop is very powerful.
I've seen you do that a number of times, Kate, in these different workshops. And you're right. It's people are thinking it, they're fretting about it, they're worrying about it. And when you bring that out at the very beginning and we put that out there, it starts the process and allows people to start to open up and start to feel safe.
The other thing, and it's all about safety. In any leadership situation, it's always about that. The other thing is that the way they do it in the class is that they're not silently writing this on pieces of paper and pushing it forward and I'm then reading it and who knows who said it. Someone is saying, I am afraid of being judged. Lots of people are feeling like that is so brave to say that. A lot of people are like probably feeling the same way. But the honesty of I won't be funny, I won't be clever, right? All of that. So that is an extremely powerful thing to watch a group digest.
So that's exactly right, Kate. And again, having experienced that myself and seen it a number of times. Mary, you've worked with Kate now a number of different times. Can you just share with our listeners and viewers today just a sort of a bit of a snapshot on those different areas and groups and environments where you and Kate have worked together?
Gosh, lots of different groups, a lot of executive groups, executive development programs, my executive MBA strategy class, which is what I love, is I connect this individual agility with organizational and strategic agility, working with my MBA students on the actual development of character. So many different environments and different groups that we've worked with.
And from your perspective, Mary, what is it that Kate brings that you think is really special and particularly important
Right.
when you're thinking about the students that you're working with?
Well, it's one of the things that I find in all walks of life is that when you see somebody with character, competence, and commitment, these are the people that you want to align yourself with. And that's exactly what Kate brings in the environment. And around how this plays out then is it establishes immediate trust with any students I've ever seen. So we've talked about this in prior episodes that what we do is trust people's character. We trust their competence. We trust their commitment. And that's exactly what Kate reveals right from the get-go. And I think then to entertain these spaces of vulnerability that people have and trust that they're going to be with somebody who will guide them through processes that will be incredibly developmental. And that's exactly what I see with what Kate does.
So then, Kate, over to you. I mean, when Mary first approached you to do an improv workshop around leadership character, and the first time you walked into a group of either EMBAs or MBAs, I mean, what were your thoughts about working with Mary and this particular group of students?
Well, I get the pleasure of watching Mary introduce me and introduce the class to this concept over and over and over again. And it from the very first time I watched that, the way she set it up changed me in the way that I digest it myself. She made it extremely clear. She even said, you might be wondering why. Like, she sets that all up so brilliantly that it's just such a beautiful lead into what I do. And then the way she debriefs it as well. So there's something so beautiful about how Mary puts it in a context that they can understand. Then they come in and then I understand it. She bridges the gap between the two of us brilliantly. And I love that. And I am always happy to sit at the beginning of the workshop every single time and watch Mary teach.
So that then brings us to a question. Actually, I want to ask you about something, Kate, that you've mentioned to me a number of times before. After you've done the first couple of workshops with Mary and with people in the business world, I think it said to me, the corporate world really needs improv so badly. Why do you say this? And can you give me some examples of maybe why you think that is?
Well, I just watched them honestly talk about, fear of being on the spot, lack of control, judgment, not being clever, not being interesting, not being creative, and then working with them for 2 hours and them exploding and having all of those things that they said they weren't, they were. And there's this concept, like even Mary said at the beginning of this interview, I do not perceive myself as an intellect, right? And I think that there's this interesting sort of judgment that there's a certain world that is creative and there's a certain world that isn't. Everything we do is creative, all of that. And I think that when the groups of people suddenly realize they are creative, they were creative, they can trust their instincts, they can rely on each other, they can collaborate and all of that. It's amazing to watch the energy in the room and to watch these people have these beautiful epiphanies and moments. So I just think it takes a little nudging, and sometimes I have to, sometimes people are like, I don't know if I'm gonna stay, and I'm like, you're staying. You just kind of gotta say, no, you're staying, it's going to be fine. And so many times the people who had this huge resistance at the start of the class are the ones who want to come and study with me. And I find that very fascinating as well. The ones who are really, and then, I don't know. So I think that, I'm going to say, I think everybody should be taking improv classes with whoever, because they're the foundations for the rules of life in any capacity. So you get to, in real time, apply them.
So I think that's exactly right, Kate. Again, having observed it and experienced it, Mary, I'd really like you to sort of add to that is when you see Kate walk into a room and you know what these students are like. I mean, you've taught them for years, you've had these classes for a while, and somehow they change almost in front of your eyes, with the space that Kate creates and how she brings them through it. What are your thoughts on that as well as you watch these students transform and why the corporate world needs this so badly?
Yeah, it's, I've used the phrase that I find that people step into organizations or even academic institutions and they have a character lobotomy. Like they lose a sense of who they are. They're afraid. All of those things that Kate's talking about, that fear, the fear, even though they don't necessarily articulate it, the actual, until they're actually going to do improv, right? Then they go, oh, shoot, it's like, there, it's right in front of me. I realize, well, what am I afraid of? And so they wouldn't necessarily even have known that they're wearing all of this sort of armor that they've got, until they get exposed to what is a fairly, quite a gentle practice that gets them, confronting and understanding that. And I love your language, Kate, about the most important classroom is the one that's going on in your head. So it's not what anybody else is saying or doing or thinking, but how are you processing this? And so what I see unfold is them learning about themselves, becoming more self-aware, which is a key part of character, becoming more self-aware. What is going on? Why am I resisting this? Or why am I enjoying this? Or, when I didn't think I was enjoying it. Whatever is going on, there's a sense-making process that improv demands of you.
So, but there's another part, maybe if I just ask you to expand on that a little bit more. There's this transformation that occurs to you inside of the class, but there's also something that Kate's talked about before, is that people start to think about and process them. It's almost like they start to take the stereotypes. Maybe you're an engineer and you've come into an MBA class, but there seems to be something else that occurs as well, is that people seem to throw off stereotypes or pigeonholing or how they've thought about themselves in the past. Have you seen that time and again as people engage in improv and in Kate's classes?
Yeah, I think this, armoring up that I was talking about are, even how we armor up on identity. I am this, and, therefore I can't do that. I have seen many executives who go, I'm a serious person. I'm not, I can't laugh or have fun. It's like I'm a professional, right? It's like these identities about these kinds of things, which until you start to kind of crack the egg or the armor on it, you begin to then expose that if this is the way you're defining yourself or defining others, what are you limiting about them? How does that allow you to be open-minded, interconnected, all of these facets of character that we know to be important?
And when people start to take their armor down, I think that's when you kind of feel vulnerable. And that's when I think creating a safe space is super important, which then leads me to the next question, Kate, I had for you. I'm trying to understand if you can maybe share with our listeners and viewers, what does a typical leader character improv workshop look like? And what do you need? Can you run through an example? But in particular, how is it that you create that safe space so that people feel comfortable kind of experimenting and pushing, like letting the armor drop and pushing on parts of their identity that in the past they've held pretty dear?
I think that a leader is doing something that is very brave. And I think a leader is asking everybody else to do the same. So I always tell people how I came to improv. I had a learning disability. I had a very difficult time learning how to read or write when I was a kid. I was in special ed, and an improv class came along and just completely changed my life. And so from that point forward, I followed that train. And I have almost cried once telling that story. I don't know what, I don't know. Something happened to me in the moment when I was talking about it. I don't know if it was this moment, I don't know, that of me going, oh my gosh, look at me here and look at me here. because I would never think that I would be hanging out with these guys and gals ever. They were never part of my school world. I was in the basement. I was being taught in a very different way. So there's something very brave about me opening up and being honest about that. And I think by me being brave like that, then I ask them to be brave, and we kind of meet each other in that situation. And there's something very human about that. I think we all want to collaborate. And the more we learn about where our defenses show up in collaboration, and what I will say as we're starting to go through exercise is ask yourself if you truly are in threat to survival. Or is this threat to your vulnerability or the armor in which Mary talked about? And so that's where the class is the class that's going on in your head. But just keep going back to that and trusting that. So I think that in there, that temperature, the vibe of the class gets set very quickly with that.
And so that's, and I've seen you do that again, and it really is something which allows. Well, I think people are inspired by it, Kate, right? And you talk
Bill,
about,
I have to say something, because you are the one who brought me to Mary, and I wasn't sure whether I should do it or not. And I asked you very early on if you thought that would be too vulnerable making. Is this a good idea? And you know, you were the one who said, I think you should. Like, you encouraged me to be honest and brave that way. And I thank you for that, because I think that it has truly set a good tone. And like I said, we're everybody's got to be brave here. And so I thank you for that, Bill, because you were so encouraging of that.
Oh, thank you, Kate. That means a lot. And it's, again, one of the best things I ever did was to introduce you and Mary together, because I just think the impact you've had on the lives of so many people has been remarkable. So thinking that, and can you just maybe for the audience just take us through what a typical, let's call it a 2 or 3 hour improv session would look like, just so people have an understanding of what's included in something like that.
Well, we're going to talk about why I came to it. We're going to talk about what the resistance might be for them to do it. What might stand in the way once we understand what the resistance might be. What might stand in the way for you to be brave, for you to be courageous, for you to open up. What might stand in the way of that? So there's a little bit of talking, and then we just get on our feet. And I think the first thing they have to do is go inside themselves and start walking around and being aware of where they're at, and then start being aware of the collaboration of where the room is at. So through exercises where they start to notice each other, really see each other, and then starting to get physical and moving around together, and then just through different exercises. But it's all about collaboration, commitment, and it's all about the other person. And them digesting that it has nothing to do with them at this moment. They're showing up for each other. So, you know, that is a big one. And everybody, every actor, every sports person, every manager, every teacher, every leader loves the idea of it being about other people, which really speaks to me. And Mary, I'd love to hear what you think about this. It speaks to me in the fact that I think we just want to be there for each other. I truly think we want to be seen and see each other and be there for each other. And isn't that what leadership is about? But once people really digest that and they realize it isn't about them, they've actually showed up for each other, everybody starts to have a good time. And what do you think that is, Mary?
Well, we do know, right? There's a basic need for belonging,
Right.
right? It just comes from that, I think. And there's a lot of, you can go back in history and try to understand, right, why, even from how our DNA is set up. I think we have that need, but as you've talked about, the fear of being judged, that vulnerability interrupts, I think, the potential for connection.
And Kate, one of the things that's really important, so I love the idea of this external focus. The other thing that you get people doing, though, is moving. There's something about having your body move that allows other parts to allow the armor to come down, to allow yourself to be more creative. I mean, you've done that purposely, though, as you design these classes, right? Is to have movement being an early part of that.
Yes, because the thing is that if I say to you, if you read how to lobby a tennis ball over the net over and over and over again, you technically know how to lobby a tennis ball over the net. But you have to sort of hold a tennis ball and lobby it. You have to put it in your body. And at the very beginning, when I asked them to stand up, I could see them all be like, yeah, right? Like, no thanks. I'm happy to sit here. I'm happy to have you lecture me, right? And so, yeah, it takes a little bit of a push. But then once people are walking around and moving and seeing each other, like one of the exercises that I do is as soon as you want to jump up, jump up. And at the very beginning, nobody jumps up. Nobody jumps up. And then once in a while there will be somebody. There is usually a little bit of a pause. And then I'll say, how do you know you don't want to jump up if you haven't jumped up? Did you go into your head and intellectualize that concept of whether it is a good idea to do it or not? Or did you ask your body? And then once I say, then they start. And it takes a couple of people, to do it. And then people start, or me, to just jump up. Just the idea of jumping up can seem so out of the realm. And then all of a sudden, like popcorn, there's a freedom, and then just jumping up becomes this euphoric thing. But it's hard to talk about it like this because you have to be careful, because the fear, some people could be like, already, that could conceptually makes them go, oh, this is granola, or right? It's so funny. I think you just kind of got to get in the water and go, right? Like to do it.
And Bill, I would add on this, just to bring the connection and science back to character, we talk about the big systems that underpin character development, which is a behavior that you're changing. So yes, there's the way you think about things. So you learn, you become more self-aware, but there's also physiology, right? It is that, and affect, which is your feeling, emotion, and mood. And what we do find is that people have not worked those systems. They work the cognitive system. And so partly what I love about Kate's introduction into this is say, you can let that system, calm itself down for a little bit here. Get into your body, learn about that system, become more aware of what is happening with your emotion, feeling, and mood. And what we do know down the road, and why I like the improv work, is that it becomes a practice that has you develop character, but it has you also working these big systems that often get underutilized. And so the intro piece that you do, Kate, is a great way to step into that.
And that's such a hard system to access, and I think in a safe and reliable way, which I think also is another reason why improv is such a great tool. So Kate, now you've got the group and they're starting to move around, they're feeling more comfortable, and you do these you get people warmed up. Do you then move into a series of different kinds of exercises, and how do you sort of plan and think about that? And is there a process, or do you also yourself kind of improvise, seeing how the class is progressing?
I have never I guess it's been over 30 something years now that I'm teaching. I have never winged or wunged. I have never done that with a class. I always have pretty much a curriculum that I'm going to teach, but it is constantly changing because you have to read the room. I have to read the room. I have to go, oh, they want a little bit more. They'd like a little bit more of this. I can sense that. Enough of this. So I know where I'm going, and I've developed games on the spot because I just noticed something in the moment that says, oh, let's go a little bit deeper with this. Let's go a little, let's follow that. And because there's an organic way in which people are moving, they start to develop little games themselves that I just hang back on now and let them have their group-minded games. So, there is always, I believe, there's more than one leader in any room and in any organization. There is me, the leader in that room, and then there'll be another leader that will show up. And then at lunch, there'll be a leader. The casual leader in companies really fascinates me. They choose where people are going to go for lunch, the Christmas party, all of that. But right away, very quickly, layers of leadership start to happen. And I just sort of take a step back and go, great. tweaking, letting, right? And that I'm always going to be, though, the big leader on the day, because that's what I'm hired to do, and that's what everybody wants. There is such freedom and structure. But I then hang back and just go, okay, where are we going?
And then, Kate, as the class starts to draw to a close, I think you typically sit everybody down now after they've had this hour or 2 or 2.5 or 3 hours. And then you get from them, how do they feel and what do they think? What do you typically get in the moment when the class is drawing to a close?
That there is many ways to get to the outcome that I requested. And that nobody's got the specific one formula. So they all suddenly start to go, that game worked differently than that game, or this group worked differently than that group, but they had very different dynamics, but they got to the same place. That there was joy and fun and brevity. And the question I get asked all the time is, how can I bring this to our meetings? How can I make this happen? How can we keep this? That they haven't had fun like this in a long time, and the power of fun, just the power of play and the power of fun, the power of commitment and showing up for somebody else, just how that has hardwired them in a different way or changed just in that moment. And what they feared the most didn't happen or did happen, and they just could get through it and let that be something that, because you are going to make mistakes in my class. That's the way they're designed. I want you to make mistakes. I think that we are geared to pass from grade 1, and I think that it has taught us not how to fail. It has only taught us to pass. For someone who failed all the time, I'm coming in saying, I have failed over and over again. One of the questions that there can be sort of questions that I'll ask people to stand up. And I love in these groups where I'll say, stand up if you've ever failed a class or a grade. And they'll laugh, right? Nobody stands up. Nobody. It's probably their biggest fear for some of them, right? So now I'm saying fail and enjoy it. And these games are designed to actually hold you and ask you to do that. And then notice your character and how you feel when somebody else does. And they also identify with the person who has failed, and they themselves then start to realize it's okay. It's okay. The other thing I'll say is taking risks. That takes practice. It takes practice, and they really see that. And just how they have let go of the concept that they will not be the first to go up or want to do an exercise. They will not, and they do. And how amazing it felt that the class had their back. We all understand, have each other's backs, but can you let someone have yours? And that's where it's magical. You let us take care of you. And that is where it's beautiful. And that's where I get a lot of the comments.
That's brilliant, Kate. That's so much, out of a 2 to 3 hour class, right? Mary, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you've experienced it a number of times. It all rings true to me.
Yeah, there's, I mean, we could go on for a long time about this. Let me try to pick up on a couple of threads. I want to pick up on the fun idea. Because again, in business, this is back to, well, I'm a professional, I don't have fun. And what I think we get from the work around character, if you look under transcendence, being future-oriented, optimistic, creative, and if you begin to think about fun around, I call it a lightness of being, and joyful behavior, we've got that knocked out of us pretty good. And worse yet, we're told that if we experience having fun, that it's not really productive. And yet it's massively important, right? It's this character contagion that we can bring out the best in each other. It's amazing, right? To see what people discover about themselves and discover, back to your point, Bill, about each other, that they see people in an entirely different way.
So then, Kate, that's a single class. Now, you've said to me many times after you've been through one of these sessions, oh, I wish I had them for the next 10 weeks in a row. Mm-hmm. What is it about a single class compared, say, to a series of classes when people go through this? What is it that they get when they start to go to a number of different classes that's different than just a single experience. And then Mary, maybe I'd like to sort of, from your perspective, how you see this as well. What's the difference, Kate?
Well, in the single class, they'll have hopefully a moment, and they'll have caught this wave, and they'll understand everything we're talking about, because it's so human nature, and we get it. And I believe we change all the time. So they'll have a moment where they'll say, I wasn't judgmental. I was brave. I didn't care about being funny. I did show up for the other person. So they have all of that, right? And so then it could go deeper. And where it gets deeper is the day where you don't catch flow. Because the first class is going to be like, it's great, it's got all that flow. It's the classes where people come in for 7 weeks and they didn't catch flow the exact same way. Who are you then? Right? Who are you then? How do you pull from character then when it was a bit tougher today? And I'll always say to the people who study with me over and over again, that's the most amazing class to have. Because the three philosophies are: notice more, everything's an offer, let it go. It's easy to let it go when I thought I wasn't going to like it and I loved it. But I didn't catch flow the same way today. I wasn't as present, and I don't know what that was about. And I have to let that go. What did I like about what I did? And what did I learn? And now can I let that go and come back to the next class and just show up again and not be never going to do it again, doesn't work for me anymore, that's not my thing. So there's something about practicing something over and over again and getting over when it was a tougher meeting. I don't know that I got my point across as well. I don't know that I showed up the way. How can I allow myself to not let that bring me down and let it go and get back in there again?
I love that. I think that's exactly right. Mary, from your perspective, as you've watched people go through multiple classes, and in particular when you think about habit development, I mean, there's got to be a pretty significant difference between doing a single one-off class with respect to character development and then engaging in a series of this as really an ongoing practice.
Sure. I mean, we have the same issue, right? We think about development of character as a daily practice, and I love that, Kate. You're always becoming something. Question is, what are you becoming? Are you becoming more fearful? Are you armoring up a bit more? Are you becoming more judgmental or less judgmental? So we are always becoming something. I think the very first class, whether it's an improv, character class, or a combined class about it, you're developing awareness of something that you may not have really understood before. And we think about that as an initial step of discovery. And that is powerful, but it only goes so far. It'd be like somebody going to the gym, and discovering that, they're not as strong as they thought they were, or, their core muscles are really hurting after the next day. But then they stop going to the gym. Well, your muscles are just atrophying. You're not going to the gym. We want to be thinking about character development, like what is your practice for the development? And I like improv as the practice that you can go through. It's a very well understood practice, and there are not many that I think you can actually say, wow, this is really designed well for character development. Improv is incredibly well aligned with character development. So then I'll just pick up on Kate's notion that you begin to learn who you're becoming in the context that you're in. And so that just gets deeper and deeper and deeper, where people begin to think, oh man, I thought I was open-minded and flexible. I thought I was vulnerable until, and then it was like, whoa, what was that about? And so you just keep learning more about who you are, and these muscles that we're talking about get flexed more often, right? And they're stronger and they hold up for you. And, when you're in the most difficult contexts, look at having the capacity to improvise is one of the most important abilities that somebody could possess. And then think about how character supports being able to do that.
It really is, after having studied with Kate for 10 years, it really is the class that keeps on giving. it's remarkable in terms of how well it allows you to think about yourself and to develop yourself and these habits that you create that then wash over into all other parts of your life so positively and productively.
And I also think, Bill, there's something really great about the fact that there's no homework. There's so much going on in people's lives where they have to, there's just things that you have to prepare or do to go to that. When all you have to do is show up, that's it. Just you show up, that's it. No lines, no things to buy, no nothing. Just show up. There's something so transformative about that. And then just leave, right? That's it. There's something very powerful about that as well.
There's almost a meditative element to that, right, Kate?
It is.
And you've mentioned that in the past, and it does feel like this. Classes with you does feel like for 2.5 hours I'm thinking about nothing else other than the context in which I'm in. And it's this beautiful space, I think, in everyone's week. I want to finish with my last question here, which is really some of your favorite stories that you've got, if any, around the improv sessions we've had with business students and executives. I know, Mary, that you get, in some cases, people sort of writing afterwards, like diaries, and how it's affected them. And I wonder if there's any sort of stories or things like that sort of stick out to you. Any sort of things that you feel have been important. And Kate, I don't know if you've got any stories that you can think about in terms of your experiences working with Mary and with executives where people have walked away and kind of went, I wasn't expecting that, but that was not only was it a ton of fun, that was really important to me. Any thoughts, either of you, on some of that?
I had a class once where English was probably with this group of leaders, most people spoke another language, and English was the least spoken language. And there was just like this kind of understanding each other was just a tricky thing. So we just took all language out of it and we all went gibberish. And then you have to say a nonsensical language, like we are going to create a nonsensical language. And it was incredible to watch everybody communicate with each other with no trying to figure out, all of that. And it was one of those powerful moments. And gibberish to like a seasoned actor is like, lots of seasoned actors will be, So for me, it's like, is this a good idea? And I don't know about you, Mary, but as a teacher, I just kind of stand there and trust what comes through me and I get out of the way. And when I suggested it, I just thought, okay, well, just see. We spent big portion of those exercises in gibberish. And it was one of the most magical classes I've ever taught because there was one common language that everybody spoke, everybody understood each other. My classes aren't wordy anyway. And it was incredible to watch. And everybody at the end felt the same way. So that always stands out as a highlight.
That's fantastic. Mary, any thoughts that have come from, anonymized, of course, but any sort of themes or particular stories that you recall?
Well, look at my mind as you asked that question went to the many journals I've read over the years of students who've been in that class, and it's transformative. I mean, the class I teach, transformational leadership. I mean, it truly, they'll say, this class, an improv class, I would say for people is paradigm shifting. And it opens a door that changes fundamentally how they see themselves in the world. Because think about if you begin to realize that your source of confidence is not because you know more than everybody else in the room, which is a pretty fragile place to be. But it's actually that you can step into a space with whatever you know, whoever you are. You can interconnect with others, connect as human beings, be supported, support others. Be in a space that can be cultivated where it's not about others judging you when you make a mistake, but actually having your back when you do it. It's a space of liberation for people. It's a space where they discover that this transformative, my confidence isn't anchored in the degrees I have or the education or the knowledge or my position. It's actually in my capacity to handle this unknown, work with others, be in this space. And so this is where all the work we've done around the development of character, they can kind of go back into it and go, yes, I see my courage differently. Yes, I see my humility is, amplified by the vulnerability I bring. Yes, I can see my collaboration is amplified because I can be interconnected with others, not just cognitively, but energetically. I can actually feel their energy. I can understand, what is going on here, and I can connect into the emotions that they have. And so it is absolutely transformative and paradigm shifting. And I think this practice, as you've talked about, just keeps on giving.
It's such a wonderful, liberating, exhilarating experience that allows you to grow as a person and a human being. And going back to the essence of what we're talking about I think it builds your character. And in particular, I think the wonderful thing around combining the two is that improv is, I know there's a structure around it, Kate, but inside of that structure, people really can go anywhere. What leader character then brings to that is there's an intentional, intelligent way to develop various elements of character within that structure of improv. And I think the two just feed off of each other and make them better. Those are really all the questions I really wanted to cover with you, Kate. Are there other things that you think we should talk about or want to talk about that you think we might have missed, or other thoughts that you have? And then I'll ask Mary the same question as well.
Well, as Mary was just speaking, the thing that comes out a lot in the classes, in the leader character workshops, is that we are all leaders. So there is a game that I play where everybody has to rally to make something work. And in any given class, there will always be the people who want to go first. And then I've found a way to get around that, because what ends up happening is you have all your strong, I want to go first. And then you have all the people at the end who didn't want to go first. And so I like to mix that, shuffle that up. And there was a gentleman who was extremely competent, showed extreme competence, loved the workshop right away, but was stuck and didn't know how to deal with bridging the story. And this little girl, woman, this little voice just gave him the piece. And we had such a discussion about the fact that you'll never know where leadership is going to come from. You never know who in your team might solve the problem. And if you keep an atmosphere where everybody is heard, everybody can contribute. It isn't the person. I'm so fascinated by how leaders are chosen and how leaders keep polishing their leadership skills. And do we all have the capacity to be leaders? Is it that person a leader because we're so willing to follow? But that's what really fascinates me as I come into these character leadership workshops constantly, is how does a leader stay relevant? How does a leader create an atmosphere where somebody could solve the problem that from out of the blue? And they open the atmosphere to that person being able to say that. My classes have no levels. You can study with me for 10 years and have never studied with me ever before. I don't care, because I don't think listening has a level. So that is a big part of the workshops. And I love watching leaders realize they can relax and allow it to come from other people.
So that's really insightful, Kate. And I think it also then resonates really well, Mary, with something you've said for a long time. Leadership is dispositional, not positional. And just like Kate says, can come from anywhere.
Yeah, I'll just reinforce. I think it's that disposition to lead. We don't really like this, the word leader. It kind of undermines the fact that within all of us is a potential and an essence to contribute and be and flourish. And that this world needs it. It needs it from all of us. So I think improv is a practice that allows us to explore what that looks like. I would add that, just to reinforce the importance of this individual capacity for improv, scaling to the collective, the combined, scaling to the organization, scaling to the culture, scaling to society, right? Scaling to innovation and all of these kinds of things. I think often we try to get to change of things at the organization, strategic or societal level without changing ourselves. And I think improv is a practice that has us discover around this character development that I have a long way to go to develop humility and humanity and collaboration and courage and transcendence and integrity. Like, who am I? Where is my authenticity in this if I am afraid to be who I am? So I really love the fact that we're down to, I often call it the atomic particles. This is it. Character development through improvisation. Man, if we could do this stuff, we could move a lot of agendas.
We've talked about in the past around how character is not an intellectual exercise. It really is it's an active exercise. So, Mary, you made a reference earlier to working out. I think we've said many times, you can't get fit watching someone else exercise. You have to do something differently to develop character. You've got to get out of your comfort zone. And improv is a low risk, very high return activity that, as we've talked about, has this almost magical power to develop character across almost all of its dimensions. And I think a bonus on top of that is it's great for your social life and it's a ton of fun. So I think the goal for many of us, and I think Kate, maybe you said it earlier, is find a way to make it a permanent part of your life. And not only will you not regret it, I think you'll be delighted that you've done so. Well, Kate, thank you again. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your stories and your insight and your almost bottomless wisdom. And also, frankly, for what you do to humanity. I know Mary and I have talked about it for a moment, but I was thinking about it before. And with your teaching us around yes and, you teach us to open our hearts and our minds. With telling us to let go, you help us learn not only is it okay to make mistakes, but to forgive ourselves and others for making those mistakes. And that often mistakes is where the gold actually is. With having your partners back, you teach us to support each other and to realize that what hurts one of us hurts all of us, and what helps one of us helps all of us. And with no judgment, you teach us to accept ourselves and others for who we actually are. Kate, you've been teaching me for 10 years, and Mary, you've seen this. You're relentlessly positive. You always pay attention, Kate. I've never seen you take even a moment off. And you always see things that other of us don't see. And in this, you share things with Mary. We'll be in a class, or either in Mary's class or your class, and someone will ask a question, and I'll think to myself, either A, I don't know the answer, or B, I'd answer it this way. And you and Mary have this wonderful gift of answering it in a way that I just couldn't possibly imagine. But it is so fulsome and insightful and connected. It's just a privilege. And so it is indeed a rare privilege and a pleasure to be your student and partner in this LC, this Leader Character Quest, and long may it continue. Thank you, Kate, for your time today.
Thank you for those words. That was beautiful. Thank you, Bill.
Oh, you're welcome, Kate. So, if you like what you've heard today, please share with your friends and your colleagues. If you really like our episode today, then please consider subscribing to our podcast, Question of Character. We also have a website called questionofcharacter.com, where we will be posting various resources and articles, and in particular links to any of the diagrams, schematics, or other items referred to in today's podcast. It's also a place where you can send us your comments, your thoughts on what you've heard today, and any suggestions you might have for future podcasts. We'll also post links to the Ian O. Ainatowitz Institute for Leadership at the Ivy Business School, where there are even more resources, articles, and information about the Ivy Leader Character Framework. As a final note, if anyone wants to reach out to Kate, we'll provide contact details in a link to the episode today. So till next time, thank you very much for joining us today. Goodbye.